James Carter had spent years building Carter's Grill House into a beloved national chain, but success at the top came with distance. Reports, emails, and board meetings couldn't capture the reality of life inside his restaurants. So tonight, he wasn't CEO James Carter. He was Jim Collins, an ordinary man in a worn-out baseball cap, a flannel shirt, and scuffed boots. The moment he stepped inside the restaurant, he felt it. Not just the smell of sizzling steaks and buttery rolls, but something off. A tension in the air. The kind that clung to places where people worked in fear. A hostess, barely out of her teens, greeted him with a forced smile. "Welcome to Carter's Grill House. Table for one." He nodded, scanning the dining area. The restaurant looked the part, warm lighting, polished wood, the familiar logo on the wall. But something felt too rigid. The employees moved quickly, but not with the ease of a well-run team. Their eyes darted toward the back of the restaurant like they were waiting for a storm. As James followed the hostess, he caught a glimpse of the kitchen doors swinging open. A stocky man in a crisp, ill-fitting shirt stood with arms crossed, barking something at a busboy. The kid, no older than 20, flinched. James took his seat, angling himself to observe. A waitress appeared moments later, balancing a tray of drinks on one arm, her brown ponytail swinging as she moved. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, with tired eyes that still carried warmth. Her name tag read Emily. "Hi there, welcome to Carter's. Can I get you started with something to drink?" Her voice was pleasant, but there was hesitation beneath it. "Just coffee, thanks," James said, watching her carefully. As she scribbled it down, a voice cut through the restaurant like a whip crack. "Are you kidding me, Emily?" James turned his head. The same stocky man from earlier was now standing near the hostess podium, holding a receipt in one hand, his face a shade too red. Emily's smile dropped, her fingers tightening around her notepad. You comped a dessert for table 6, the man snapped. "They got the wrong order." "Twice," Emily said quietly. The man, James assumed he was the manager, shook his head, his voice carrying for every customer to hear. "And you thought you could just give away food? Are you paying for it?" "Didn't think so." James felt his jaw tighten. Emily didn't argue. She just nodded, shoulders hunched, and hurried toward the kitchen. The conversation around the restaurant had quieted, eyes flicking toward the scene before customers awkwardly returned to their meals. James had seen enough managers in his lifetime to know exactly what kind Derek Stone was. A bully. The kind of person who let a little power swell his ego until he started treating the people beneath him like they were disposable. James stirred his coffee, watching. Minutes later, Emily returned with his drink, setting it down carefully. "Here you go. Do you need more time with the menu?" "You okay?" James asked, his voice low. She blinked. The mask almost slipped, but she recovered quickly, her professional smile snapping back into place. "Yeah. Thanks for asking. Let me know if you need anything." She turned before he could push further, vanishing into the bustle of the restaurant. James let his coffee sit untouched. He had walked in hoping to confirm that his restaurants were running smoothly. Instead, he'd stumbled onto something rotten. His fingers tapped against the ceramic cup. He had two choices. He could leave, call corporate in the morning, and let the usual channels handle it. Or he could stay, watch, learn, and deal with it himself. James leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing toward the kitchen doors. He was staying. James sat back, letting the bitter coffee settle on his tongue as the atmosphere in the restaurant thickened. He had spent years fine-tuning the Carter's Grill House experience. Quality food, warm hospitality, a place where employees felt valued. But this was something else. The staff weren't just busy. They were afraid. Emily moved swiftly between tables, balancing plates, refilling drinks, offering customers polite but clipped smiles. The warmth she had shown earlier was still there, but now James recognized it for what it was: habit. A shield. Across the room, Derek Stone prowled like a wolf watching for weakness. At the counter, a young line cook was plating a steak, carefully positioning the side dishes. Before he could send it out, Derek stormed over, snatched the plate, and shoved it back toward him. "This is garbage, Miguel," Derek sneered. "You think we're running a charity here? Do it again." Miguel, an older man with graying hair and a sweat-streaked brow, clenched his jaw. He didn't argue. He just nodded, scraping the food into the trash before reaching for a new plate. James exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the ceramic cup. Derek didn't lead, he ruled. And the staff knew better than to challenge him. James watched as Emily hurried back toward the counter, picking up a tray of drinks. Just as she turned, Derek stepped into her path. The collision was small, barely more than a jostle, but the tray tilted. One glass wobbled, slipping free, and crashed onto the tile. The restaurant went silent. Emily froze. Her face drained of color as she stared at the shattered glass, the dark stain of soda spreading across the floor. Derek sighed heavily, shaking his head. "Are you serious?" His voice was slow, drawn out, meant to humiliate. "You can't even carry a damn tray?" I'm sorry," Emily stammered, crouching to pick up the broken pieces. "Of course you're sorry," Derek snapped. "You screw up constantly. Maybe if you focused on work instead of chatting up customers, you wouldn't be such a mess." James's hand twitched. A muscle in his jaw flexed. Emily swallowed hard, continuing to gather the glass. Her fingers trembled, and James could see it now. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was scared. Derek exhaled sharply, waving a dismissive hand. "Forget it. Just go. I'll dock it from your paycheck." James's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. Heads turned, but James didn't care. "Dock her pay?" His voice cut through the tense silence, steady, but edged with something sharper. Derek blinked, turning. His smirk didn't falter. "Yeah? What about it?" James stepped closer, forcing Derek to really look at him. "That legal?" Derek scoffed. "Oh, we got ourselves a lawyer now? You don't know how things run here, buddy, so why don't you just—" "I know exactly how they should run." The words were quiet, but carried weight. For a moment, Derek hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Something in James's expression must have unsettled him because he scoffed again. But this time, there was less confidence behind it. "Look," Derek said, folding his arms. "This is none of your business. She broke something. She pays for it. Simple." James turned slightly, looking down at Emily. She wasn't moving, her fingers still curled around a shard of glass. "Leave it," he said gently. Emily hesitated, glancing between James and Derek. She was waiting, expecting to be punished for stopping. James looked back at Derek. "You dock tips too?" His voice was quieter now, but no less sharp. Derek's expression flickered, just a flicker, but enough for James to see. "That's illegal," James continued, voice smooth even. "So, I'll ask again. You dock tips?" Derek's face darkened. "Like I said, none of your damn business." James tilted his head, holding Derek's gaze just long enough for the silence to stretch, for the tension to coil tight enough that even the customers were holding their breath. Then he nodded, stepping back. "All right." He sat down, picking up his coffee again. Derek hesitated as if expecting something more, but when James said nothing, he snorted and stalked off, muttering under his breath. Emily swallowed hard, carefully setting the glass down on the counter. She turned to James, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." James didn't answer right away. He simply met her eyes and held them for a moment. Then he nodded once. Emily hesitated as if she wanted to say more, but instead, she turned and hurried back toward the kitchen. James took a slow sip of coffee, gaze locked on Derek as the manager disappeared into his office. He had everything he needed. Now it was just a matter of when. The air in the restaurant was thick with tension, the kind that seeped into every corner, clung to the walls, and made itself comfortable. James had been patient, had watched and listened, but now the moment had come. Derek had ruled through intimidation long enough. James set his coffee down with deliberate care. The clink of ceramic against wood barely registered over the hum of low conversations and clattering dishes. Across the restaurant, Derek had returned to his post at the bar, barking orders at the staff, his arrogance undisturbed. That was about to change. James rose from his seat, adjusting the worn-out cap on his head. His steps were slow, measured, unhurried, yet purposeful. Employees stole cautious glances at him, sensing something was about to happen, but unsure what. Emily had just finished wiping down a table when James approached her. She startled slightly, looking up at him with guarded eyes. "Can you get everyone out here?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Her brows knit together in confusion. "What do you mean?" James didn't break eye contact. "I need every employee out on the floor. Now." Emily hesitated, then nodded and slipped into the kitchen. Derek must have noticed the movement because he straightened, eyes narrowing as he watched the staff slowly emerge from the back. Line cooks, dishwashers, busboys, all stepping forward, confusion and curiosity flickering across their faces. "What the hell is this?" Derek scoffed, stepping around the bar. "We got a dinner rush coming in. Get back to work." James ignored him, looking over the assembled staff instead. Their faces told the story. Exhaustion, resignation, quiet fear. No one spoke, waiting to see where this was going. James exhaled, removing his cap. "My name is James Carter," he said, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "I own this place." Silence. A breathless, weighted silence. Then the shift. The widening eyes, the sharp inhales, the way Emily clapped a hand over her mouth. Derek's confidence flickered for the first time. He blinked, then let out an awkward laugh, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's a good one, pal. You expect me to believe that?" James reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped it open to his ID. He held it up just long enough for everyone, including Derek, to see the name, the company logo, the undeniable proof. Every employee stood frozen. Derek, however, recovered quickly, rolling his shoulders. "All right. So, what? You're here to do one of those corporate check-ins? You could have just called instead of pulling this whole." "This isn't a check-in," James interrupted. His voice was still calm, but there was no warmth in it now. "I came in to see how my employees are treated. And I've seen enough." Derek scoffed, arms crossing over his chest. "Look, man, you don't know how things run here. These people? They slack off when you're not watching. They take advantage. Someone's got to keep them in line. And that's what I do." James took a step closer. "Keeping people in line? That what you call it?" His gaze sharpened. "Screaming at employees, embarrassing them in front of customers, threatening to dock their pay for accidents? That's your definition of leadership." Derek rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. It's not that serious." James didn't blink. "It is to me." The tension cracked like ice under pressure. No one dared move, barely dared breathe. James let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Emily," he said, turning toward her. "How long have you worked here?" She swallowed hard. "Almost 2 years." James nodded. "And in those 2 years, how many times have you felt respected in your workplace?" Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening around the rag in her hands. She didn't need to answer. The silence said everything. James shifted his gaze to Miguel, the line cook. "How about you?" Miguel met his eyes, his expression tired but honest. "It's been rough." James turned back to Derek. "That's on you." Derek let out an incredulous laugh. "You're seriously taking their word for it? Employees always whine when they get called out. That doesn't mean I did anything wrong. You stole their tips." James's voice cut through the air like a blade. Derek's expression flickered. "That's not true." James tilted his head. "Isn't it? Because I have a lawyer who's going to take a good, hard look at the books." He paused. And if I find so much as a cent unaccounted for, I'll make sure you answer for it." The blood drained from Derek's face. James let the weight of his words settle. Then, finally, he spoke again. "You're fired." Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. James turned, scanning the restaurant. "From this moment forward, this is going to be a place where people are treated with dignity, where no one has to be afraid to do their job. Understood?" The employees exchanged glances, hesitant, uncertain. Then, one by one, nods of agreement. James looked back at Derek. "Get your things and go." For a moment, it seemed like Derek might fight back. But then, with no options left, he scoffed, grabbed his coat, and stormed toward the door. The second it swung shut behind him, the entire restaurant exhaled. Emily glanced up at James, eyes wide, voice quiet. "Is this real?" James nodded. "It's real?" And just like that, everything changed. The restaurant felt different now, lighter. The oppressive weight that had lingered under Derek's reign was gone, replaced by something fragile yet unmistakable: hope. James stood at the center of it all, scanning the faces of his employees. Some still looked stunned, others cautious, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Trust wasn't built in a day, and he knew the scars left behind wouldn't heal overnight. But this was the first step. Emily still stood near the counter, hands gripping a rag like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Miguel leaned against the kitchen doorframe, his expression unreadable, while the other staff whispered in low voices, exchanging uncertain glances. James took a breath. "I know that wasn't easy." His voice carried through the quiet space. "I know things have been rough. But let me be clear, this restaurant isn't just a business to me. It's my name, my legacy, and it's nothing without the people who keep it running." Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does that mean you're shutting us down?" James frowned, taken aback. "What? No." She hesitated. "It's just usually, when corporate finds a mess like this, they clean house. New hires, new policies. Start over fresh." He shook his head. "No one's getting replaced. This place doesn't need new employees. It needs new leadership." The weight of those words settled over them, but this time it wasn't fear they wore on their faces. It was something softer. James exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I came here expecting to find a business problem, but what I found was a people problem. And people can be fixed." A chuckle broke the silence, quiet but genuine. "Miguel." The older cook shook his head with a wry smile. "Guess that means we've got a chance, huh?" James met his gaze. "More than a chance." He turned back to Emily. "I'm going to need help turning things around. Someone who understands the staff, the way things run day to day. Someone who cares about this place." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Who?" James said simply. Emily blinked, stunned into silence. Miguel let out a low whistle. "Didn't see that coming?" James smiled slightly. "You're sharp, hardworking, and you've stuck it out when others would have left. That's the kind of leadership I want here." Emily shook her head, a disbelieving laugh escaping. "Me? I don't have management experience. I wouldn't even know where to start." "You start by caring," James said. "And you already do." Her breath hitched, eyes shining with something dangerously close to tears. She turned away, scrubbing at her face with the rag. When she looked back, her lips trembled into a smile. "If you really mean it." She swallowed. "I won't let you down." James nodded. "I know you won't." The others shifted, glancing at each other, uncertainty still present, but melting slowly into something else: relief. A second chance. James clapped his hands together. "All right, listen up. Things are going to change. Fair wages, fair treatment, and respect, real respect. But I can't do it alone. I need each of you to step up, to help rebuild this place into something better." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Miguel smirked. Guess that means no more Derek breathing down our necks, huh? James chuckled. Not unless he wants a lawsuit on his hands. Laughter spread, lightening the mood. For the first time in a long time, Carter's Grill House felt like a place worth working for. And James knew this was just the beginning.